Well, in 1950s, I'd seen a picture in the Times of a Makaha wave that a photographer called Scoop Suzuki took, and it was taken with a great big Graflex on the point, and it showed Buzzy Trent and Woody Brown and Bob Simmons on this huge wave. I got so excited, I thought I'm going to have to go over there and start doing that again. I hadn't done it for a while, and it was very exciting to me to try to preserve some of this for history, and I knew it would change. I wanted to show what it was in the very beginning. I could see the changes taking place slowly, changes from the early Hawaiian boards to the boards that we had today. The fiberglass had just come in after the war. That's what really revolutionized surfing. Most of us in those days were just surfing for fun, just for the love of the sport, and we didn't think about making any money. I mean, not large amounts of money. I took pictures and sold them for $1 a piece to my friends just to get enough money to take more pictures and buy more photography equipment because I loved that. And then later on, I made posters to sell so I could afford to take trips to Hawaii and stay for a month at a time. But I never intended to make it a big industry, and because there were other people who did and who made huge amounts of money, and that did change the face of surfing. It made it more commercial, and it made it less fun, actually. But the 50s were kind of a transitional era where surfing was rapidly growing, and it was a sleeping giant. There were thousands of people out there getting interested. After the Gidget picture that came out, people started buying boards and the crowds got worse and worse. Everybody took up surfing. Surfing became the thing to do in the summer in California. Yeah, Salt Creek is a surfing spot that's been around for a lot of years. It's a beautiful left. There's a reef break and a shore break, and when conditions are right, it was really hard to beat. There's Benny Reinhold, who was known as a good surfer, but he always had a huge board. And when you see him on a wave or take off for a wave, everybody get out of his way. Oh, he was a good surfer. His board was uncontrollable being that size. Nobody cut back in those days. You can see how different the styles are. They don't climb and drop and work the waves the way they did because the equipment wasn't built for it. The rails weren't built for it. A concave nose and just one single fin. It was a good day, and it was a makeable left. Nothing sensational, but fun day, no wind. It would take a fairly good crowd. There was probably a dozen or so at a time would constitute a manageable crowd. This is some footwork I took with a front camera on the front of the board. That's Tommy Wart Opai's legs. He was always proud of his legs. San Onofre is a well-known place, known to every surfer in California and probably all over the world. Here's Jack White shaping a board. Jack White was a wonderful guy. Unfortunately, he was caught out one day and was killed. His father was quite a wealthy man. He wanted to donate some kind of a tribute to Jack. He wanted to put showers and pave the road and do all sorts of things to fix Onofre up, make it more comfortable. And all the surfers got together and turned it down. They didn't want it to be that convenient. They wanted to preserve the natural barriers. This is Ron Drummond. He wrote the first surfing book, The Art of Wave Riding, which he put out in about 1920. Only man ever to ride a canoe at San Onofre or anywhere. I never saw him wipe out. Dana Point. This is a place that's known from surfers of the 30s as one of the best big wave places on the coast. Of course, no harbor there then. There was a rocky point, and waves would form off that point on a big south swell, and they would be makeable waves with huge faces. And it was probably one of the best places to surf in California, although it didn't break very frequently. Here's Benny Reinhold. You can see the size of that board. You can see why there's nobody around him. We did have huge waves at Dana Point, and unfortunately they came along and made a harbor out of it. This is one of the most famous places of California, the Ventura Overhead. It broke a long way out. It was really a long break, and of course there were no wetsuits, so it wasn't surfed very often. You can see the boards in the air. You can tell why nobody could perform on them. The new boards were just coming in. The shapes were getting better. Fiberglass was coming in. You can see the surf there, and that's a long way out. It resembled Sunset Beach, Hawaii, to quite an extent in that there were shifting peaks out there. There's Les Williams there going on, who is also one of the top surfers of the 50s. That was taken with a long telephoto lens. It got a little bit hazy there towards the end, but that was good surfing in those days. I think that's Tommy Zahn. No wetsuits, no leashes, and it was a long swim. There's Tommy Zahn coming out. He's heading in a hurry to get by that fire and get warmed up. Got some great rides that day, remember him. If you got one good ride in a day, you remember it for days and weeks afterwards. Just keep reliving that ride. You can tell how cold it was with the fires and everybody huddled around the fire. There's Buzzy, Trent, Mickey Munoz were the two people I recognized there. This is Malibu, which is well known throughout the world as a premier surfing spot. It was first surfed in the 20s by a few people like Tom Blake and Duke Hanimoku, but it began to get better and better in the 50s after Bob Simmons and Jack Quiggs made radical changes in board design. We surfed here in the 30s. We had the old redwood boards and we couldn't perform the way these guys did. This is the beginning of the high-performance surfing. Malibu was such a perfect little wave. You can see from these water shots, even on a small day. And with the poor equipment at the time, and some of these surfers weren't the greatest who were out there, but you can see what a beautiful wave it was, and still is. Tandem surfing was popular in those days. To take their girlfriends out. And the boards were big enough so they could get a girl on a wave and have her stand up sometimes. The ride was long enough. They had really made some radical changes in the shapes and the down rails, which made boards more turnable. This is Joe Quick. He had a style that was just very, very loose and relaxed. He'd stand still and just stand with his arms close together. But he knew what he was doing. He had perfect control of that wave. Hardly any crowds. Sometimes we'd go up there and we'd wish there were more people to talk to because there wouldn't be enough surfers to socialize with. It was just a wave you had all to yourself. This was really the very beginnings of Malibu as far as Malibu being a crowded place. It got very crowded after this. When the late 50s and early 60s came in, it became very, very crowded. This is really the inception of the days of surfing Malibu. I had a waterproof box made by Warnie Miller, whom you may have heard of. He made me this box made out of wood with a little 16mm camera in it, and I thought this was the way to go to get good movies. I'd seen some of Bud Brown's work in Hawaii, and I thought, well, I'd try it here in California. I don't know how the beach washed away, but this is a summer when there was absolutely no beach. I've never seen it like that since. It was just incredible. Paddling was considered kind of a recreational thing. When the surf was flat, they'd have paddling races. Well, the top paddler was Tom Zahn in those days. The baldish guy is Bill Bridgman, and they used to call him Skinhead. He was bald when he was about 30. And that's Willie Moore. And this is John McMahon, a Hawaiian surfer, one of the top surfers of the day. And John is in charge of his paddling race. I think we decided to have a race just for fun at girls' events and men events. And it was just something to do and get together in a social way. Paddling was a recreational way of getting to the beach on a beautiful, sunny, calm day, and something to do to socialize. There was no money involved in it, no prizes. It was just maybe a trophy or two, maybe small trophies. I don't know, I don't remember, but it was just mainly a social event. The beach girls of the 50s were very much interested in surfing, I think because of the surfers, the boys. It was a good way to meet boys, and they got together that way, and a lot of romances bloomed on the beach, and a lot of marriages, and it was just kind of a social scene down there. But there were a number of women, more so than you would think would be involved in a man's sport. They didn't all get out in big ways, but they were there. Some of them had boards, and they hung out with the surfers. In the early days of the 50s, nobody surfed the North Shore. It was considered unsurfable. The biggest surf at that time was Makaha. Yeah, I had a long telephoto lens, and I got up on the platform that was left over from the international contest the week before, and it was a little bit of rickety, so it was hard to really get steady material there. This is Waimea on a big day. Probably weren't more than a dozen guys who could surf Waimea in those days. There were guys from Hawaii. There was Woody Brown and Wally Froyseth and Buzzy Trent came over, and Fred Van Dyke.